On this week's episode of Ride the Lightning, the Tesla unofficial podcast, Tesla starts production on the very first test fleet of Model 3s. We learn what battery size the Model 3 won't have. The P100D Ludicrous Model S sets yet another quickness record, and much more. Good day to you, friends. I'm Ryan McCaffrey. This is Ride the Lightning, the Tesla unofficial podcast, episode number 80 for February 12th, 2017, joined by a snoozing Maggie the Boxer, who a week can't seem to go by without me worrying about her in some capacity. She's recovered super well from her 2 big dental surgeries. She had her follow-up. Everything looks good. I think I told you that last week, but she is not eating. So she's not eating enough. So they have me weighing her once a week now, and then we'll go from there. But it's just like the poor dog. I'm just trying to get her healthy. But we're doing everything we can, and I appreciate everybody's well wishes. Everybody always, most people ask about her on the Ride the Lightning calls or on emails, and appreciate you thinking about her. But on to Tesla stuff this week. You know, while I wouldn't quite say that the dam has burst just yet on Model 3 information, this is absolutely, I think, the biggest week of Model 3 news since arguably the week of the Model 3 reveal almost 11 months ago already. So let's not waste any time. We'll get right to it, and we start right here with a huge Reuters exclusive. Big hat tip to Reuters on this one. Tesla is shutting down the Fremont production line during the week of February 20th to begin, quote, test building the Model 3. The shutdown is going to allow Tesla to add capacity to the existing paint shop, because obviously that paint shop, which currently handles both the S and the X, and it's going to handle the 3, it's going to have to get a serious upgrade in order to handle that much higher of a volume. So the paint shop's getting an upgrade, and they're doing, quote, other general maintenance. A Tesla spokesperson confirmed the production pause, as they referred to it, by saying, quote, this will allow Tesla to begin Model 3 production later this year as planned and enable us to start the ramp towards 500,000 vehicles annually in 2018. The Tesla spokesperson added that the pause was not expected to have a material impact on first quarter production or delivery figures, as the company had added production days to compensate. So I guess they're doing some long weekends, or long weeks, I should say, and short weekends in Fremont at the Tesla plant. Some other tidbits from this, and that is this: despite Elon saying that the car's design had reached pencils down status last year, Reuters' source said that the design changes were still underway for the Model 3, which I'll tell you, you just got to be real. We got to temper our expectations. That could potentially hinder the ramp up to full production if something gets tweaked. They've got to stop and adjust, or something gets tweaked and goes wrong, or something goes wrong and requires a tweak. So again, I want to make sure everybody is, most of all myself, is keeping expectations grounded so that we don't get our head too far up in the clouds before it's warranted to do so. But I wanted to talk about this. Obviously, this is a huge story this week. So the first thing I wanted to point out, these should be the alpha cars. I'm already seeing some people and some outlets referring to these as betas. They're probably not going to be betas. The betas, if you're going based on the Model S and the Model X, are going to come much, much later. They'll be much closer to production. They'll be sort of basically the last thing before production. Also, as far as the number of these things, we don't know. It could be anywhere from a couple dozen vehicles in this test fleet to a couple hundred of them. You remember that story from maybe late last year that said Tesla had acquired enough parts to build up to 300 test cars, Model 3. So it's not to say they're going to build that many, but it could be up to that many based on that bit of data from late last year. And then on the alpha beta subject, just wanted to point out, if these are alphas, remember that the exterior and or the interior could still end up getting tweaked a bit. If you go back to the Model S alphas, there's video of a silver alpha, there are photos of alphas. They did change ever so slightly in the cosmetic department, so that could still happen when we inevitably start seeing pictures in the wild of these Model 3 alphas, they won't be final, but they'll give us a really, really, really good idea of what the car's looking like and where it's at. I would expect this to be discussed, I don't know in how much detail, but I would expect this to be discussed on the fourth quarter / full financial year 2016 conference call with analysts that's coming up on the 22nd. So stay tuned for that. Again, I already told you I'll be covering that. I'll have the usual thing I have for you, which is all the best quotes just filtered down for you and served up. At the very, very least, even if somehow Elon dodges it on doesn't mention it and then gets asked and dodges it, I would expect it to at least get mentioned in the investor letter, that PDF that goes out along with every quarterly report, because the timing of this is just too coincidental. The fact that they're starting Model 3 test fleet production the week of February 20th, and they have a conference, they have the Q4 call that week, I can't imagine that's a coincidence. I expect to hear about this on that call from Tesla. The other thing we might hear about on that call, in my opinion, we may very well finally get an updated reservation count on that call. If we don't, I think we'll get one at the Model 3 Part 3 reveal event where Elon can come on stage and say, we now, as it talks about the car, and say, we now have over 500,000, we have over 500,000 reservations for Model 3. It's unprecedented in any industry, particularly the automotive industry. But again, I think I mentioned this last week. I'm going to be on a business trip on February 22nd. So unfortunately, I'm going to be unable to participate in the call itself as I've been able to do for the last couple of these. But number one, I haven't been called on when I've tried to ask a question in the couple of these that I've been on so far. But again, I will be diving back into the archive, and I'll again be diving in, finding the good stuff for you guys, and putting it on that week's show. And again, the last point I want to make on this topic is, and it's one I almost hate to keep saying this, although actually I'm glad to keep saying this as opposed to what the alternative is. Again, this is yet another indication that everything is proceeding on schedule, and that this means a good number of us may very well be taking delivery of our Model 3s this year. It's still on track to happen, because we continue to have absolutely zero indications, either from Tesla officially and directly, or from a single source anywhere, anonymous or otherwise, zero indications that Tesla has hit any snags or delays so far in Model 3 production. I mean, we go back, remember that Elon and Tesla talked about trying to learn from the mistakes of Model S and X when they suffered production delays, they had cars that were slow to get to customers, they had a lot of frustrated reservation holders. They said that they learned from all that and were doing their best to have that not happen again with the Model 3. And again, so far can take them at their word that everything appears to be on track. It was not like this at this point in time with either the S or the X. Both of those cars had suffered delays by the time they were allegedly 6 to 9 months out. So this is great news so far, not only for Tesla as a company, but obviously more importantly for everybody listening, for all of us with Model 3 reservations. This is fantastic. Next this week is some more Model 3 news, This time, it does come straight from Elon himself, and that is Model 3 will not have a 100 kilowatt hour battery option because according to Elon, the wheelbase can't fit a 100 kilowatt hour battery. So the question then is, what will it top out at? It is not, let's call it maybe not $1 million question, but maybe let's call it a $60,000 question. I'm going to tie it now. Allow me, if you please, to tie another story into this discussion, another news item. Electrek bagged a scoop of their own this week, both Reuters and Electrek, both with home run scoops. Electrek has a source telling them that Tesla is currently testing a 70D Model 3, a 70 kilowatt hour pack in a Model 3 with dual motors. Now, by Electrek's own math, they use a watt hours per mile estimate. You know, the S's do between, they tend to get 280 to 325 watt hours per mile, depending on the variation of the S you have. The X's can go a bit higher because they're just bigger, heavier cars. But using a watt hour estimate based on the efficiency gains that Tesla has said to expect with the Model 3, Electrek suggests that the 70D Model 3 could theoretically get just over 300 miles of EPA-rated range with that 70 kilowatt hour dual motor configuration. Remember as well that they're factoring in that the threes are all going to have the new 2170 battery cell architecture, which is more energy dense than the cells that are in the S's and X now, effectively meaning that Tesla's going to be able to get more power out of a cell than they can today. Now, who knows? I have no idea what the prototype that I wrote in on March 31st was packing. Remember, if you remember back, I was in the car with Doug Field, who is the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Tesla, and it was the silver prototype that you've seen photographed around and on, magazine covers. And I asked him, if you remember, I played the audio, I asked him on the drive about this, and Doug did confirm in the car that the one I was riding in was a dual motor car, but he didn't give any battery specifics. But anyway, the point being, so if the 3 won't be able to fit a 100 kilowatt hour pack, I don't think it's going to be too far off. I don't think 70 is going to be the top end of things. Because after all, remember, the Model 3 is about 90% the overall size of the Model S. So, the wheelbase is going to be is roughly 90%-ish, most likely, the Model S wheelbase. Now, the 3 is also not quite as wide, so that takes away some cell capacity as well. But again, it is a smaller car, but not much smaller. 90% of the overall size of the S, plus the 3 is going to have, again, the aforementioned higher density battery chemistry, the 2170 cells. So based on that, my guesstimate, I want to just emphasize that, my guesstimate is that the top battery option is going to be at either somewhere between an 80 and a 90 kilowatt hour. I think Tesla will go that high. We know they can do it. They're doing it with the S and the X now. And I'll tell you, if Tesla has any plans to roll out the 70 that they're testing, and why else would they be testing a 70 if they don't plan to roll it out? That would seem inefficient, which is not something that we use to describe Tesla very often. I bet there's going to be an 85 or a 90 that gets maybe 325 miles of EPA-rated range. Again, I can only speculate, but using what we know now, with the fact that, it's going to be the base battery option's less than 60, the top end is less than 100. So I think we're going to get 3 battery options. Feel free, by the way, to flag this part of the show and throw it back in my face later when I'm terribly wrong, because this is what always happens when I make predictions. But I think we're looking at 3 battery options: 55, 70 kilowatt hour, and 85, which will get us approximately, I think just rough guesstimates here, 225 miles on the 55, 275 on the 70, and 325 on the 85D. So, and probably the P85D would be, 290 to 300 if I had to just take a shot in the dark at it. That just seems like good spacing as far as not only the battery, the physical battery size, but also the range gap between, there would be people that would want to, be fine with the 225. Again, I know that 215 is what they said, is what Elon said at the reveal, but he was very careful to say at least 215, and we've already seen the Bolt come around with 238, I think it is. So, so a lot of people have speculated they think Elon won't stand for that. They'll make sure that the base Model 3 exceeds the Bolt. I don't know, we'll see. I'm not sure, especially since the Bolt has now been sort of shown to be a compliance car, which is exactly what Elon feared. And I played audio of that a few weeks back, 3, 4, 5 weeks back. I'm not sure Elon particularly even is worried about or spending a moment thinking about the Bolt. But I think 225 or so on the base, 275 for a mid-range, which a lot of people would probably go for. And for the people that, just want to have a ton of range, 325 in a, potential 85D situation. So that the only question, I think, isn't whether or not it's going to be 3 packs, but whether it's going to be 2 packs. Pardon me. I'm not saying this well. I think the only question is it going to be 3 separate battery packs, a 55, 70, and an 85, or is it going to be 2 packs, say the 70 and 85, with the lower base version being a software lock, so that anybody that buys the base version could give Tesla an extra $5,000 to $8,000 later to upgrade their range if they get their Model 3 and figure, oh wow, this Tesla is really cool, just like everybody said it was, but man, I feel like I could be using more range. And then Tesla could just be like, well, just touch a few buttons on your dashboard and we're happy to make that happen for you. I could absolutely see Tesla doing that, not only for the upsell possibility, because again, remember who is going to be buying the base Model 3s. It's probably going to be it's probably going to be mostly people who've never had an electric car before. Granted, I realize most of us are people that have never had an electric car before, but especially as it pertains to the Model 3 and especially the base $35,000 version. So if Tesla can afford to sell them a car that actually has a 70 kilowatt hour battery in it that's software locked, that does a couple things. One, that allows that person to charge to 100% all the time, which kind of gives them more range than they would have in a native 70 kilowatt hour pack, which needs to be charged to 85 or 90% in order to maintain battery health. So that might help them kind of creep closer to or edge out the Bolt even on EPA rated range. But also, again, it would give that potential upsell option for down the road. If someone gets into this is going to be their first electric car and they get into it and they like it, but maybe they end up driving it in the wintertime and find like, oh, okay, well, that's, the range thing it cuts a little close for my purposes, and but I can spend $5,000 to upgrade it or whatever, and like, oh, maybe I'll, and that's I could see that being a net positive for Tesla, financially speaking, in the grand scheme of things. We shall see. I think that's entirely possible, but I do think it's looking more and more like we're going to get 3 battery options and not 2, because if the base option is 215 or 225, I just don't see, there will be a bigger battery option, but And I got to figure that bigger battery option, it's not just going to be 250 or 260. Because that's just, look for the S. I see them getting close to, if not exceeding, 300 EPA miles of rated range. And so I just don't see the gap. I don't see there being just two options, either a 215, 225, and then all the way up to 300. I think there's got to be a middle step in there. So we shall see. Next up this week. There was one more point I wanted to make on this, and that is Elon also said in this series of tweets that he mentioned that the Model S and the X aren't going to go above 100 kilowatt hour. So the 3 won't be getting 100, and the S and X are not going above that, which is really, really interesting. He said the pickup truck might, and that the semi will naturally have to. So the insane pace of improvement that Tesla has been on for 4 years now, it's going to slow down, which I know I've been talking about in a recent episode or maybe even more, a couple of them. Because now with that statement by Elon, if you're looking at an S or an X, if you're thinking, man, I'm sold on Tesla, I want to get one, but man, they're advancing so quickly. Maybe I should wait, or maybe I should lease instead of buy. You can now look at this and say, okay, if 100 kilowatt hour is it for a while, hardware 2 for the new version of autopilot is it for a while, and that's going to enable full self-driving, then you know what? Yeah, you can probably comfortably buy an S or an X without necessarily worrying that it's going to be, I don't want to say obsolete, but outdone with a newer thing by the time you even take delivery of it. Now, Elon did just say a week or two ago that Tesla will always keep innovating and that they're going to have substantial updates to their cars every 12 to 18 months, but this, at least, we can now actually see the curve slowing down. We can see the curve flattening out on Tesla. The curve had just been spiking nearly straight up for a while, but hardware 2, 100 kilowatt hour. Feel free to get your S or X if you've been thinking about it. Now, an interior redesign on the S could be the next major improvement that they make to the car. Because remember, I did this story fairly recently about the interior design lead that they hired away from Volvo. But I figure with that, like I said at the time, it remains to be seen whether or not that Tesla is going to also tie that to a Model S total exterior redesign in a few years, or if they'll do an interior redesign sooner. It's entirely possible. Because, knowing Tesla, they're not going to want to sit around and wait to do the interior in a few years if Elon and the team feel that it needs it now. So we'll see. Next up this week, Motor Trend set a new world record in the Model S. Quickest 0 to 60 time for any production car ever. Any production car. Not electrics, not limited to any categories. Other than production cars. They got it to 0 to 60 in 2.275 seconds, which is simply a wow moment. Wow. Wow. I drove the P85D. Like I said, I reviewed that for IGN, and that bad boy did, at the time, 3.2 seconds. They did a software update later, took it to 3.1, and then, of course, Ludicrous came online in a bit later. But so the car I drove did 3.2, and that felt like that was the most gleeful, gut punch roller coaster I've ever experienced in a vehicle of any kind. And the fact of the matter is, the S, the same car, just beat that by a second, by 33%. That's crazy. That is crazy. Now, it is worth noting, I just wanted to pass along some observations from this because you may have read the Motor Trend article or you may have watched the Motor Trend video. And you may have noticed the same things I did if you did read and or watch that. So those things are this. While the Model S that Motor Trend tested is fully production level with no modifications, note that the car has no sunroof or all glass roof. It's a body roof for the least amount of weight. It also had no trunk liner in it. Elon actually took to Twitter afterwards to say that if you want to lighten your load just a little bit, you can have Tesla service take yours out too, if you want to. That car was almost certainly charged to 100%, which day to day you're not going to do in your car. And it was definitely, because they straight up said it was definitely using the Ludicrous Plus Easter egg. And the last big thing that was probably the most obvious of all, if you took a look at this car was rocking the 21-inch Arachnid wheels that you can only get from the referral program prize winnings, or potentially you could buy one from someone who got them in the referral program and sold them to you. Because remember, and if you're asking, well, what difference does it make? The Arachnid wheels, Tesla claims, are lighter than the stock 21-inch turbine wheels. So Motor Trend did every, for lack of a better term, legal trick they could to get this Model S as light as possible. So in other words, you're probably not going to be able to match that 2.275 number on the street or even on the track. But if you do have a P100D Ludicrous, you would definitely be able to come close enough that you're almost certain to destroy anyone who is trying to go toe-to-toe with you. Just remember, always be careful if you're wherever you are punching it. Be careful. But this is still, again, setting aside the fact that Motor Trend, and presumably in cooperation with Tesla, not cut every corner, but took every advantage they possibly could here. This is awesome. It's just so awesome. Elon knows that performance gets attention. And look, this story was shared everywhere. This was all over the place. Now, Elon may not be doing this for attention, and by this I mean, setting up record-setting runs with Motor Trend. He might not be doing it for attention, but what performance does is get car guys going to Tesla's website to learn more about the cars. And that potentially gets more people in the door with Tesla and converts more people over to the potential joys of electric car driving. This all goes back, what I'm talking about now goes back to my theory. Pardon me if you're a longtime listener who's heard this before, but my personal theory that Ludicrous exists primarily because nobody started making electric cars like Elon thought and hoped and invited other car makers to do back in his acceptance speech for the Motor Trend Car of the Year award that the Model S got in 2012. He said, "I hope other people copy us." And no one has. And so it is my conspiracy theory, I guess, I don't know if it's a conspiracy, but it is my maybe a little out there theory that Ludicrous exists primarily to shame other car makers into building electric cars in order to try and keep up with what Elon Musk and Tesla are doing. You may think I'm crazy. You may be nodding your head like, yeah, you're making sense. Maybe you're somewhere in between. I'm not sure, but that's my theory, and I'll tell you, I'm sticking to it. I am sticking to it. A couple of more little stories this week. Quickly here, for all of you owners of brand new hardware 2-enabled Teslas, Elon did also mention on Twitter this week that Summon, Auto Park, High Beam Dim, wiper sensors, and auto steer outside of highways should be uploaded to hardware 2 cars next month. So if you have a new Tesla and you've been waiting on that functionality to come around, look for it in the month of March. But again, Elon time, just take it with a grain of salt. One other update for all of you Model S and X owners, perhaps you've gotten this update pushed to your vehicle already, but if you haven't, you will soon see in your maps screen that superchargers, which of course are all noted on the map, they now show you how many stalls are available in that moment, which is awesome. That's something that people have been asking for a while. It makes a ton of sense. That'll help alleviate the congestion by helping to reroute people to other near superchargers when one is full. But the comment I wanted to make about this, because our friend Nick Hoffman, a Patreon producer, friend of the show, that he was the first to give me the heads up on this. And I had to message him back because I was confused, and I think other people could end up being confused also. So if you look at a picture of it, the icon on the map that's above the supercharger location, it looks like a battery bar with these orange bars filled in for every stall that's filled. Okay, so that sounds on paper like it makes sense. But when you look at it, in my humble opinion, it feels a bit backwards, and here's why. So meaning a fully filled bar means that no superchargers are available. And the reason I think that's a little bit backwards is this, because Tesla teaches Tesla owners everything in the car teaches you that a full bar means good things, means you've got plenty of juice. This is good. You're in good shape. So here, a full bar is bad. It means all the stalls are full. You want an empty bar on this particular graph. Now, it's worth pointing out, you can also tap each supercharger site on the map, and it will give you it'll give you everything in just plain clear English. If, like me, you might have been a little confused by the icon, it'll say, Harris Ranch, 7 of 8 stalls available. So it'll just tell you if you tap it. But I kind of thought that was a little bit backwards. Maybe, again, you may disagree, but when I looked at it, I was confused, and for that reason. But also of note, by the way, just about that, another Tesla source tells me that these things, that the map is supposed to ping the superchargers for updates at least once every 5 minutes. So the reason I say that is that means that your navigation in-car should be fairly accurate pretty much all the time, which is great. That's exactly what you want it to do. And remember too, by the way, final point, remember all of this cool stuff that's being rolled out now should be in the Model 3 from day one. So again, just more good stuff to look forward to when we all take deliveries of our Model 3. Finally this week, a quick note to my caller from last week's episode who was from India, and to any other listeners that I might have out there from India, good news. According to a tweet from Elon Musk, Tesla is hoping to launch in India this summer. So that is fantastic news. So to that gentleman who called in last week and was considering buying a used Model S, I had told you that you don't have any superchargers yet. Well, you now should be getting them fairly soon. So it should be sometime this year if Tesla intends to get into the region in the summer. You should reasonably expect some superchargers to roll out in that time frame as well. So that is excellent news of Tesla getting set to enter another very large, very fast-growing market. Good stuff there. All right, that is enough talking from me. My goodness, my counter says 34 minutes straight of me yapping away. So I will take a breath here, come back, and again, just several more outstanding, excellent, thought-provoking calls from you guys in the Ride the Lightning hotline. So let's do that right after this short little musical break. It is your time to shine here in the Ride the Lightning hotline. I love this part of the show. I love it more every week because I'm just continually thrilled with the calls that come in each and every week. I, again, get so many of them that I can't get to them all, or else I'd have a 2-hour show. And again, I want to be respectful of your time. So if you don't hear yourself, odds are you're going to make the Patreon exclusive bonus episode that goes up usually the first weekend of any month. But for now, we've got a handful of good stuff lined up, good calls here in the Ride the Lightning hotline, which I encourage you to call anytime, day or night. Leave a message. There are two ways. You can either call the toll-free number or Skype it, and that's 1-888-989-8752. That's 1-888-989-TSLA. Or you can just record into your phone and email me that file email it to teslapodcast@gmail.com. Now, as for the hotline, it is kindly provided by lifeonrecord.com. So if you know someone special with an upcoming birthday, anniversary, graduation, or some other special occasion, you can give them a unique gift of recorded voices from friends and family telling them why they're special. The recordings can be podcasted or put onto a keepsake. And again, the site to check out for more is lifeonrecord.com. I want to start with Pascal in Morocco, who he has a very interesting thought in response to my chatter last week about the cost of autopilot and the cost of self-driving on the Model 3 and whether it will be the same price or cheaper than the S and the X. And then right after that, before I start talking again, I'm going to play Lawton from Chicago, a call from him, our old friend there. He calls in on the same topic, and both Pascal and Lawton are kind of on the same page here, so I wanted to give them both their due. So let's listen to these two quick calls, and then we will talk about what they have to say regarding autopilot's cost on Model 3. So Pascal and then Lawton, go ahead.
Hi Ryan, this is Pascal from Morocco. I'm not a long-time listener, but I have to share with you how amazed I am by your devotion and consistency to put the show out each and every week without a ditch. Following the last week question about the cost of the autopilot suite in Model 3, I have to share with you a different perspective because I think you missed the main point on that. Since you are in the video game industry, you know that software has a cost and a huge cost. For Tesla, this autopilot software is a huge asset that they have to pay off over the years, but it's not a recurring cost. I mean that they can choose how and when to amortize this asset. If we had access to the cost breakdown of this autopilot, I wouldn't be surprised if the cost was not so much about hardware than it is about software amortization. Over the $8,000 we have to pay for a full autopilot suite on an S or an X, or an X, I'm pretty sure that the hardware is not more than $3,000. Where the rest is for software and margin, of course. In respect of Elon's master plan part 1, I'm sure that this amortization will be mostly made on S and X to lessen the cost of autopilot in the Model 3. I bet that this option will be no more than $4,000 on a Model 3. This is my bet. So cheers, and please give a big hug to MTB. See you.
Hi Ryan, it's Lawton from Chicago. Wanted to follow up on the topic from episode 79 of Model 3 option pricing. I couldn't agree more that economies of scale will make upgrades significantly more affordable. I anticipate upgrades to cost around 25 to 50% less than equivalent Model S and X versions, given that the starting price for the base Model 3 is about half the price. However, I think that software upgrades to unlock autopilot and self-driving options will be the most affordable of all. We already know that all Model 3s will ship standard with the sensors needed for self-driving. Given that this is a sunk cost for Tesla, they will want to maximize upgrades to self-driving. Software development lends itself very well to economies of scale. Since the autonomous sensor hardware will most likely be the same among all models, the additional cost for Tesla to adapt the self-driving software from the Model S and X platforms to Model 3 is minimal. Thus, I expect the cost of upgrading to self-driving to be around $4,000 or less. The average profit margin of a car company is around 8%. Given the hundreds of thousands of Model 3s that will likely take advantage of upgrading to self-driving, this could potentially be a huge profit center for Tesla and go a long way towards keeping the company profitable. Look forward to your thoughts and keep up the great work.
So Pascal, you are correct, and Lawton, you are correct too, in that you are both looking at this from a different angle. And again, that's why I love the call-in part of the show. And you may very well be right. Both of you may very, very well be right, because the hardware costs will only go down as Tesla manufactures the cameras, sensors, and radar in larger and larger quantities, but the man years put into the software development, that's the real investment. So I hope you're right that S and X are paying for that now, and that per the master plan, the secret master plan, all of that's leading to a more affordable self-driving solution for the Model 3. So thank you to Pascal and to Lawton for the excellent call. And Pascal had actually requested that I give Maggie the Boxer MTB a big hug. She's looking at me. She's laying down and kind of looking at me with one eye like, what are you doing? Maggie, I'm going to give you a big hug right now for Pascal. You want a big hug? Okay. Good girl. All right. That was for you, Pascal. All right, let's move on. Oh, now she's up and shaking off. Sorry, Mags. I didn't mean to wake you up. Let's go to Dave from Silicon Valley, who we've heard from before. We heard from him. He was considering whether or not to convert his 90D Model S order into a 100D order. So Dave has called in with his decision, as well as some points of, or at least food for thought to chew on here. So Dave, take it away.
Hi, Ryan. This is Dave from Tesla Country in Silicon Valley. You had a question back at me about whether or not I was going to actually get a 100D versus the 90D. Just to give you a little history, we did 72,000 miles of traveling in 3 years on our pre-autopilot 85. Only had a few range issues when it came to the trips, but most of those are irrelevant now with the supercharger network expansion that's gone on. Although I have, during those period of time, seen the warning to slow down to ensure reaching the next charger when I pushed a little too hard, drove a little too hard, or started with inadequate range. The idea of skipping superchargers is a great idea, and certainly easily done even now with a good full charge, and start off early in the morning and skip the next charger. And because usually the first charger, especially leaving from home, is only 40, 50 miles away, maybe 100 miles away. And so getting to the next one's not too bad. And the extra range of a 90 will do that for me. The idea of doing it during a trip, though, if you stop for a nice long lunch, would be great, except that it does tie up that supercharger slot. It takes, you probably know, about the same length of time to do the first two-thirds of a charge as it does the last third of a charge, because it ramps down on the amps. So that side of it, just for consideration of others, doing the skip the supercharger thing probably doesn't actually save you a significant amount of time, 5-10 minutes maybe, because just the amount of time to get off the road and get the charge to get to the next charger, versus sitting at a supercharger for a double charge, basically. So yeah, I'm going to stick with the 90 because I think for us the free supercharger factor with the amount of miles that we do, it's going to be a significant cost in the long run, because I do imagine we will be doing this for the long run. Anyway, enjoyed listening to you, and I've got some other stuff I'm sure I'll call about, and we'll talk later. But thanks, bye.
Thanks for the update, Dave. I was absolutely curious what you had decided. And you make a couple of great points that are relevant to us future Tesla owners. And that is, on trips, being able to skip superchargers might not actually save you a ton of time due to the tapering effect when the battery fills up. Still, though, range is always king. And you and I, Dave, both live in Northern California, and in fact, really California in general, where our Tesla batteries won't often be adversely affected by weather, either extreme weather, hot or cold. But, for many other folks who are going to be making long distance trips in the winter in, Midwest, East Coast in their Model 3, maybe over Thanksgiving or the holidays, that bigger battery can make an enormous and perhaps even critical difference. But, Dave, your wisdom is appreciated, and I suppose the lesson here is to think very, very carefully about your individual use case when you're ready to order your car, and then make your battery choice accordingly. For you looked at what you use the car for, and that extra jump from 90 to 100 kilowatt hours wasn't worth it for you, and that's that good. You just saved yourself $3,000, so that you can take that $3,000 and put it towards an extended warranty or a service plan, or save it for tires, or use it to get an Expel wrap on your car, any million number of things. But for other folks in other climates and scenarios, it might be worth it for them to go ahead and make the jump up to 100. In fact, on that note, here is Manoush. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I couldn't quite pick it up perfectly on the phone, but I believe the gentleman's name is Manoush. He's in the Bay Area as well, and he replies to another of my raps from last week. I remember I talked at the top of the show about I noted the seeming rarity of multi-coat red Model X's, and he's ordering one. And in fact, he mentions a bit about the 100 kilowatt hour battery option. So, Manoush, go ahead.
Hey, Ryan. This is Manoj calling from the SF Bay area. Listen to your podcast almost every week. Great job doing that. Awesome information, I gather, week in and week out. Something which struck me is it was your discussion on the last week's podcast regarding the multi-code red Model X. And coincidentally, what happens is I have just placed a reservation for a red multi-code Model X 100D. And how we arrived at this decision was we actually went to the Fremont factory, and we were actually torn between the blue and the red. And once we saw, and we were lucky enough to see both of them side by side, and we really thought, okay, red is the way to go, at least in my wife and I's opinion. I was kind of surprised as to how much the multi-code red looks kind of like the signature red in low light. I think they might have changed the shade a little bit or darkened it or something like that, but it really looks good, like close up, even for the Model X. So we went for it, and also the 100D upgrade, which I paid the extra $3,000 for because I want to get all the range I can get. One question I had though, I've been curious for a while, is why is it called multi-coat red? Is it because it has many coats, or is it a combination of multiple shades? I was not really sure. Anyway, great work. Keep it up, and listen to your next podcast too. Bye.
Well, first I want to say congratulations. It is going to be, no doubt, a long month or two as you wait for that new red Model X to get built and into your hands. And again, like I said, it's funny that I just happened to. We also heard from Dave this week, who as we just heard, he's stuck with 90 kilowatt hours for his S, and you're going with 100 on your X. It just further illustrates my point about choosing what works for your individual use case. Now, as to your question about multi-coat red, I wanted to throw out a quick fun fact. It was originally called Sunset Red, but that name didn't last long. Red was added in March of 2013. That's when production on multi-coat red S's started. So the very, very first S's, the 2012s and the real early 2013s, like my cousin Pat's, it was not even available. Multi-coat red, to answer your question, as well as, by the way, the multi-coat pearl white, which is now the only white option, just like multi-coat red's the only red. It's 3 coats, to answer your question. I did look this up. I thought I remembered it, and it turns out I was correct. I did remember it correctly. It is 3 coats. So with that in mind, I wanted to offer a word of friendly advice, if I may. I would advise looking into getting an Expel or Suntech or whatever brand you prefer, but just for sort of, that's common. Well, I'm just going to say Expel for this case of this example. You might want to look into getting an Expel wrap, which is the protective clear film on at least the front of your Model X. The reason being is that multi-coat red will be tricky to touch up or match if something happens to it and you need paint repair. And, you know, with an X, you're obviously going to get, you're going to have a lot of gorgeous red paint right up there up front, since there's no nose cone on the X. And so it's just a lot of beautiful multi-coat red painted surface area. I would really recommend protecting that, because that's going to be, you know, bugs and bird, just all sorts of, just rock chips. Also, you know, it'd be a good thing to look into. I'm not, hey, it's not cheap, so I'm not pretending to say, hey, you got to do it. But if you can afford it, it's probably worth the investment just to try and protect that beautiful multi-coat red front end. But just food for thought. Enjoy that Model X. Hopefully you don't have too much longer to wait. Next up is an anonymous caller who makes an interesting note about what happened to his car after his last software update. So I wanted to play and then discuss this real quick. So, sir, you're on the air.
Hi, love your show. Hope you get your Tesla soon. Question. I recently did an upgrade from 8.0 to 8.2 on my Model S, vintage November 2015, and I did it while it wasn't plugged in. And before the upgrade, it said there were 221 miles left in the tank, and after the upgrade, there were 223 miles in the tank. Seemed kind of odd to me. What do you think?
So you did not leave your name, but nevertheless, sir, thank you for the call. And I believe I actually do know the answer to this. And that is, Tesla changes how it calculates the range in the cars from time to time. They change how it's presented to you. It's happened before. So it would appear that they tweaked it again with the update that you just applied. Now, I trust that they're doing their best to make it more accurate and not less, because I would think common sense would dictate that they wouldn't revise it upwards like that if they weren't confident in the number. I can't imagine they're doing it to give you a false, artificial, inflated sense of security with your range as you're driving. But because you'd think, if anything, they would play it more conservatively. So the fact that they seem to have maybe revised it up a little bit, I would think that bodes well, and then that's going to be an accurate number for you to go by. So thank you for that call. We've got one more call this week. It is from Lars in Madrid, in Spain. He's test driving. He's actually got 2 questions, one of which pertains to a test drive he's coming up. So hopefully Lars is going to hear this before he gets out on that test drive. Lars, you're on the air.
Hello, Ryan and MTB. This is Lars. I'm calling you from Madrid in Spain. I have 2 questions about Tesla that I hope you can help me with. My first question is about test driving the Model S. Here in Spain, there are no showrooms or service centers yet, but Tesla has recently made test drives available for those of us who are interested in Tesla. And I'm scheduled to do a test drive next Wednesday. Woohoo! How do I get the most out of that? What should I look out for? What should I try and make sure I test on the car. Any advice would be much appreciated. My second question is, I am a day one Model 3 reservation holder, but since I live in Spain all the way over in Europe, and rollout, according to Elon, is going to start over near LA and move eastwards, I was wondering if you have any estimate of how long time it will take them before delivery starts going out in Europe. Thanks, that's all. Thank you for a great show.
Hi, Lars. Thank you for the call. Second question first, and that is, I don't think there's much of a chance that you will get to take delivery of your Model 3 in 2017, even under the very best production goal circumstances for Tesla. I mean, if they stay on course, as I've talked a lot about this week, then maybe summer of 2018, because I suspect that Tesla is going to focus heavily on the U.S. market first, if perhaps in order to help maximize the tax credit, because depending how many deliveries they make and how close that gets them to the 200,000 mark, it's not a cutoff of the tax credit, but it is the trigger of it starting to diminish. So it's the kicker that begins the expiration of the tax credit by, it extends it for another quarter or two and then diminishes it for another quarter or two and then it goes away. So I would expect North American deliveries to take a lot of priority first. Now, the good news is you're a left-hand drive country. So it's possible, I have no idea, to be fair, but it's possible that you could see your car before the British do, because just since they're right-hand drive and the Tesla they'll be all geared up making left-hand drive cars. But again, being a left-hand drive territory isn't going to hurt your cause. That's for sure. Now, as for your first question about getting the most out of your test drive, since you're waiting for your 3, and you're not, you say, you're not actively looking to make a purchasing decision on the S, I would say this: just enjoy it. Just enjoy it as much as you can. There's nothing you have to necessarily super look for or not, be sure to not miss out on. But I would just say, don't let the Tesla rep that'll be in the car with you rush you if you can avoid it. Obviously, be respectful to them, and they, because they are trying to sell as many cars as they can. But I would also say, don't be afraid to slow down to a near stop or a full stop if there's no one around and it's safe to do so, and you can punch it from zero and just nail it, just hit that pedal and have fun doing acceleration runs. So don't be shy about that. Don't be shy about the rep judging you. Just have fun. Be safe, of course, but have fun. I will give you this recommendation: turn the radio off if it's not already off, so that you can listen to what in my opinion it's beautiful, but at the very least, even if you don't agree with that, it is such a change from the internal combustion engine cars we've all been driving our whole lives. Turn off the radio and just enjoy the silence of driving around in an electric car. It's pretty cool and it's kind of eerie. I think it's a beautiful thing. You may even want to roll down the windows for a few minutes while you're doing that, so you can just be driving with no other sound other than the tire noise. So maybe give that a try. And the last thing I would suggest is try autopilot if you can. Odds are that your test drive route that the Tesla rep is going to take you on will probably include a place where you can use autopilot. So be sure to try it and have fun. I mean, have fun. That's really the big thing, is just enjoy it. I would suggest bringing someone along with you. Have them sit in the back seat and maybe film your test drive from the back seat, just so that you can go back later and look at your natural reactions. Particularly, I did that with my cousin Pat for his Model X test drive last summer. He of course owns a Model S, but it's a very, 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 very early Model S, early 2013 build. So he doesn't have parking sensors, folding mirrors, let alone autopilot. It was his first time trying out autopilot, and I filmed it from the back seat and got to send it to him later. And he now has that moment preserved forever that we're all going to have of that first time where you take your hands off the wheel and your feet off the pedals, and you're just like, whoa, this is so weird. So yeah, maybe see if you can bring a friend or family member along to record you from the back seat. So have a great time, Lars. Thanks to everybody for your outstanding phone calls this week. Again, if you have a question, a comment, a discussion topic, a reply to one of the other phone calls or something I've said this week, give me a call. It's toll free. You can call anytime, day or night, and the number is 1-888-989-8752. That's 1-888-989-TSLA. Or just record it on your voice memo program on your smartphone and email me the file, email me your recording. You can email me at teslapodcast@gmail.com. All right, a few parting words here for you right after I take a quick breather. I want to first mention that if you intend to purchase a Model S or Model X, get yourself $1,000 off that car by using this referral code. Punch it into your browser. It's a short link, ts.la/Jeff2311. That's JEFF 2311. The Patreon, if you are curious to see how you can support the podcast, if you get a lot out of it every week, maybe want to help support me and my efforts here, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Tesla Podcast. And on that note, I want to thank the Patreon producers. This is the very excellent group of people who kindly support the podcast at the $20 per month level or higher. And those wonderful souls are Jeff Bartram, Paul Hussey, DJ Harbaugh, Pete White, Wolfgang Obergen, George Cassiopo, ZL Klein, David Brander, Nick Hoffman, Jonathan Wales, John Waltauer, Scott Gillis, Michael Lucas, Alexi Heft, David Kittle, Lisa Kaz, Michael O'Prey, Logan Willis, Matthew Parra, Michael Lester, and John E. Ford, as well as Robert Miracle. So thank you all so much. I want to also mention a chance to save yourself from some money on Tesla accessories, either for your car or just for you. If you visit abstractocean.com, they sell a bunch of cool Tesla accessories, both for the car and for you. Use the coupon code RTL Podcast as all one word, RTL Podcast. Use that coupon code at checkout, and you will get 20% off of your order. Subscribe to Dave T's weekly Tesla newsletter at teslaweekly.com. Check out teslarati.com throughout the week for the latest and greatest in the world of Tesla news. You can follow me on Twitter at DMC_Ryan. And as I've mentioned a couple times this week, the show's email address is teslapodcast@gmail.com. Finally, most of you subscribe to the podcast already, but that is the easiest and most convenient way, because then it just gets downloaded straight to you every week without you having to do anything. You can subscribe on most major podcast services. Those include iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, or there's the hosting site where you can grab the RSS feed or individual MP3 files. And that site is teslapodcast.libsyn, spelled LIBSYN.com. Thank you all so much. It has been one of the coolest weeks of Tesla news in a while, thanks to all these exciting new Model 3 developments. We're getting there. It's mid-February, and it's starting to get real. What an exciting week this was. I had an extra fun time doing the podcast this week. Hope you enjoyed listening. Again, my name is Ryan McCaffrey. You already knew that. This is Ride the Lightning, the unofficial Tesla podcast. And happy electric motoring. I'll see everybody next week.